got another class, another subclass as well. We've got the Ranger. This has seen some changes. And like you said, it's now an expert, so Rangers can be like the best at whether it's survival or stealth. They now feel like at home amongst the Rogue and the Bard.
Absolutely. And the Ranger has, of the three classes in this Unearthed Arcana, the most new features. Now, some of the features here are going to be familiar to anyone who has Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, because some of these features are either from that book or these are new versions of features that are found there. All of this is combined to create a Ranger that comes out swinging at first level and is solid, perhaps too solid, all the way up to 20th level. And I say it this way because this is a playtest. And with the Ranger in particular, we have erred on the side of making them as badass as it makes sense to make them right now. And if necessary, some things can be reined in. But there is a lot of fun stuff here for any of us who love Rangers to enjoy. So that starts with, at first level, the expertise that we mentioned. You also get, and this is a biggie for Rangers, you now get access to your spellcasting at first level, and that includes cantrips. Rangers now have access to a number of spells that is unprecedented for the class in the past. If you are a Ranger player, you are going to now find yourself with an amazing buffet of magical options in front of you that will help you tailor make the Ranger you want to play, rather than waiting for second level. One reason we did this was not only to get Rangers going with this important pillar of the class right away, and also to give Rangers some iconic abilities right out of the gate via their spellcasting feature. But it was also important for us to do this because of how Favored Enemy now works. Favored Enemy now allows the Ranger to always have the Hunter's Mark spell prepared. It does not count against the number of spells the Ranger has prepared, and it does not require concentration. So the Ranger is now going to be able to place Hunter's Mark on a foe and not have to concentrate on it, and that is how they designate that foe as their favored enemy. Now, I very casually said something just a moment ago. I mentioned when we were talking about the Bard, but critical to also mention here for Rangers, and that is, rather than Rangers having a list of spells that they know, Rangers can now prepare their spells. What that means is, whenever a Ranger finishes a long rest, they can swap out the spells that are available to them to cast in the coming day.
Right.
This is huge. This means that Ranger players are going to be able to customize what their Ranger is able to do in different adventures on different adventuring days to really target what are the challenges they think are going to be ahead of them. This also makes it possible, as we discussed about the Bard, for Rangers to feel more at liberty to use many of the non-combat spells that are now available to them. So that when they're in an adventure or a session that's not really about fighting, but it's about exploration, or it might be about social interaction, the Ranger can lean into the parts of their spell list that speak to those pillars of the game. But oh my gosh, there's so much more. This class has some under-the-hood things going on for it that are going to be huge. And one of these we'll also want to touch on when we're talking about the Rogue is actually not in the class write-up in this Unearthed Arcana for the Ranger and the Rogue. It's in the rules glossary. And that is, we give, for this playtest, a critical new definition to the light weapon property.
Okay.
So the light weapon property in the 2014 Player's Handbook is a key part of the two-weapon fighting rule in that version of the book's combat rules. For anyone who's not familiar, in that rule, if you were wielding two weapons that have the light property, if you attack with one, on that turn you can then with a bonus action attack with the other.
Right.
And you're not able to add your ability modifier to the damage of that bonus attack unless that ability modifier is negative.
Just like being ambidextrous in real life. That's my experience.
Right. And I'm bringing this up, of course, because two-weapon fighting has always been one of the iconic optional modes for both Rangers and Rogues.
Right.
So here is what is critically different here, and also really important for how Favored Enemy now works. We have made it so that, first off, that two-weapon fighting rule no longer exists as a separate rule. In fact, and I've actually talked about this before in a video, that rule is a bit misplaced in the 2014 Player's Handbook because it isn't actually a two-weapon fighting rule. It's simply telling you how the light weapon property functions. Mm-hmm. So what we have done, and we actually have already done this in our recent starter set, Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, we've moved that rule into the light weapon property itself. Here in the playtest, we go even further. That bonus attack no longer requires your bonus action. Now how the light weapon property functions is if you take the attack action on your turn and you attack with a light weapon, if you have another light weapon in hand, you can make a free extra attack with that weapon as part of the same action, but you're still not able to add your ability modifier to the damage of that extra attack.
This aligns with my interests.
So this is huge. And we're doing this because it is actually for us and for many players been a pain point for a number of years that two-weapon fighting characters, or more correctly, characters who use light weapons,
right,
have had sort of a bonus action tax
right,
that then conflicts with many other features in the game that also require their bonus action. We've been planning on playtesting this publicly for a few years now. So I'm so excited that it's finally in the public's hands to try out. And it had to be here because a part of the design of the new Favored Enemy is Rangers using their bonus action to apply Hunter's Mark. And we did not want Rangers who like using two weapons to suddenly not be able to interact with their Favored Enemy in a clean way.
Yeah. You've got too many stages to basically just play the way you want to, like threading everything to that bonus action it can be a hindrance. Exactly. Now, there are also still now other things in the game that can modify how you interact with the light weapon property. So if anyone's curious, there are still options available for modifying how you interact with that, including through fighting styles and other feats. And I say other feats because at second level, Rangers get the fighting style feature, which they had in the 2014 Player's Handbook. But this time, fighting styles have all been redesigned as feats. There's a reason for this. We want any class that has access to fighting styles to have the option of taking more of them whenever you choose feats. Nice.
And so that's also a big deal for Rangers. You no longer have this, well, I picked one and I hope I like it. Because now you can pick that one, and then if you want more, any time that you're picking feats later, because you qualify as a Ranger for fighting style feats, you can go back to that pool. So that's also another one of the awesome things going on for Rangers. We also have now an even better version of the roving feature that debuted in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Now the speed boost is 10 feet instead of 5. The Tireless feature is back and revised. We also have Nature's Veil, which is Rangers' ability to just calling on the spirits of nature to turn invisible. They get Blind Sight through their feral senses. They get Foe Slayer at 18th level instead of 20th level. There is a whole lot of awesome in this class. And I think people are going to have their socks knocked off by just what this ranger is now capable of doing. And we haven't even talked about the hunter yet.
Yeah, we haven't talked about the subclass. We haven't talked about the hunter, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So let's delve into the hunter.
So the hunter has been re-looked at from top to bottom. What you're going to see here is we looked at the hunter, an unusual subclass that at different points had sub-feature choices. And we realized exactly the same thing that many ranger players realized over the last many years. And that is, many of those options just don't stack up against each other. In each group, there was almost always the obvious great one and then two that were fine, but not as good as the obvious great one.
Right.
And so what we've done with the hunter is looked at the one that is the best and refine it so that all hunters will be delighted to have it. So you're going to see that with Hunter's Prey. You're going to see that with multi-attack. You're going to see that with Superior Hunter's Defense. And you're also going to see a brand new feature. There's this new feature at 6th level for the Hunter called Hunter's Lore. And what this now does, piggybacking on the new way Favorite Enemy works, is as long as your Hunter's mark is on somebody, and in my mind, the hunter should have special stuff going on when they use Hunter's Mark, the spell that has their subclass name in it.
Right.
And so from 6th level on, when a hunter has Hunter's Mark on a creature, the hunter knows all of that creature's resistances, immunities, and vulnerabilities. Because the hunter should be the greatest hunter in the game. The one who is able, particularly calling on the forces of nature to aid them to figure out how best to take down this foe.
Rather than some of that kind of feeling being in the Battlemaster fighter from earlier, it makes way more sense to be in Ranger.
But we'll get to the fighter. We'll get to the fighter in a future Unearthed Arcana.
Later on.
Yes.
So there were any more features from the Ranger Hunter?
So one of the fun things for people to try out in the Hunter is the new version of multi-attack. Here we are experimenting with something we've never done before in the current version of the game. And that is allowing you to down level a spell. Here's what's going on. The Hunter, when you get the multi-attack feature at 10th level, has the ability to always have the Conjure Barrage spell prepared. Doesn't count against the number of spells you have prepared. So it's like Hunter's Mark in that way. But there's more. You can not only cast this 3rd level spell with a 3rd level spell slot, you can also cast it with 1st and 2nd level spell slots. For each lower level that you go, you take one of the damage dice away. Here's the thing. Conjure Barrage, even cast at 1st level, because of its area of effect, is going to be awesome. So if you realize, okay, I want to hit a bunch of people, but don't need the damage to be the level that Conjure Barrage is normally at,
right. Down
level that sucker and still cast the spell. This is a new spellcasting mechanic, and I was super excited to put it into the Hunter, and I am looking forward to seeing people. They already have loved the ability to up level spells.
Yeah.
Now we're experimenting with down leveling spells.
If you want to give me an AoE as a ranger at level 1, I'm not going to say no.
Well, this is at 10th level.
Well, 10th level, yeah.
But the reason why this is a huge deal is particularly with a class like the Ranger, and this is true for the Paladin as well, where your spell slots are more constrained than, say, the Bards.
Right.
Being able to use a heavy-hitting spell, particularly, again, because of its very large area of effect, with your lower level slots is really good for you, because then that means you can use your higher level slots for something else if, again, let's say really what your priority is, hitting many people and not necessarily the damage being as high as possible.
Right.
So this gives you the ability to basically turn the dial up and down. It's a playtest. We'll see how it goes. But again, I'm excited for this to be a new toy in the toy box for people to experiment with.
Perfect.
Now, there are two more Ranger things related to spellcasting I want to touch on because they're in the rules glossary.
Okay.
One of the suggested spells for the Ranger here is Barkskin. And anyone who's familiar with the 2014 version of Barkskin might be wondering, why is this being presented as an iconic spell for the Ranger? Because, unfortunately, the current design of Barkskin makes it so that it's often great to cast on somebody else who isn't wearing armor, but isn't so great for the Ranger themselves in a typical circumstance. Not only because of the dexterity a Ranger typically has, but also because of the armor that Rangers can wear. We have been planning to revise Barkskin for quite some time, and so there is a new version of Barkskin in the rules glossary of this UA, where whoever you cast it on, bark still appears on them and protects them, but now it is this bark that regenerates and gives the target of the spell temporary hit points. We've also added the ability to up-level Barkskin and start with higher level slots, which will also be very helpful for the Druid in a future Unearthed Arcana, the ability to cast it on multiple people who will now all have this bark, and you can imagine it being broken away as the temporary hit points go away, and then the bark regrows to have this protective layer that will complement a person's armor class rather than being a replacement for armor class, or in the case of how Barkskin worked before, created a minimum for your armor class.
Right.
The other spell that appears on the Ranger's suggested spell list that gets a new version in this UA is Guidance. Guidance is a beloved cantrip, especially outside combat. It's often not practical to cast in combat because of the concentration it requires and its casting time. But we've also seen that outside combat, the spell has had the potential to be overly spammable, to the point that some groups just decide if someone has Guidance, everyone adds 1d4 to their rolls all the time. Despite the fact that the concentration of the spell in the past often would make that technically not work. But what we've decided is we want to experiment with a new version of the spell that is reactive. And so similar to what we're doing with the Bard's Bardic Inspiration, Guidance is now used as a reaction in response to somebody else failing a particular roll. But if the person accepts that benefit and rolls the die that Guidance gives them, they can't benefit from it again until they finish a long rest. This is a cantrip. Guidance is not meant to be the all-day bonus.
Right.
It is a little bit of magic you can sprinkle on. You can still cast it at will, but you can't just keep casting it on the same person all day long. It's like each person can benefit from this primal or divine guidance once a day.
Okay.
But you could certainly go and cast it on an entire village of people if you happen to witness them failing at something.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing, is that it is cast in response to a failure. And I think this is going to be fun for Rangers to have now that they finally get cantrips. So that here they're going to have things like Guidance and Thorn Whip. And I think things that are going to feel really great in this class's hands. Really leaning into, overall, this idea of the Ranger being the expert of the wilderness who has not only gets the expertise feature once but twice, because Rangers get it also at a higher level, giving the Ranger 4, depending on how high up you get in the class, up to 4 skills that you're going to have expertise in. And also channeling this primal magic as you track creatures and use your hunter's mark on them. It's exciting stuff.
It's a very powerful Ranger.
Yes.
I'm trying to contain my excitement.
And my excitement isn't it's not abstract. In our upcoming playtest here, I will be playing a ranger. So
Yeah, well, I love. I mean, of course, I really, Thorn Whip belongs to a ranger. Like these are very huntery spells that make a lot of sense, especially like if you want to play kind of a bounty hunter ranger.
Yes.
That stuff.
And that's something as we are looking at really ensuring each class has a place all their own. One of the things that became very clear as we analyzed what we're currently calling the Primal spell list is, while druids are the sort of the paramount primal spellcasters, they are to the ranger what the cleric is to the paladin, of having access to the full range of primal spells. That said, there are a number of spells on that list that are really a better fit for the ranger. And even things like Thorn Whip, of getting someone closer to you,
Yeah.
many druids don't actually want
No.
that. Because many druids do not have the resilience that a ranger has.
Right.
And so Thorn Whip is actually a great example of, sure, some druids, particularly some Circle of the Moon druids, might want to pull someone closer before they then transform into a beast and attack them. But many druids would rather be 30 to 60 feet that way casting spells on somebody from afar. Whereas the ranger, particularly a ranger who is focusing on melee weapons, will very happily be like, no, you get back over here. I'm not done with you yet.
Yeah, it's perfect.